24 frames per second. For almost a century, it's been a film industry standard. Sure, there are some movies that have used higher frame rates, typically with not much success. I want to show you how movies came to use 24 frames per second in the first place. It's a fascinating tale involving the manufacture of early telephones and the film industry's race for synchronized sound. So let's find out. Why are movies 24 frames per second? At the beginning of the film industry, there were silent films. Now, I can't say exactly what the frame rate was at this time because there really was no standard. Movie cameras were hand cranked by the cameraman, and they got really good at keeping their cranking consistent. But for artistic purposes, they would change the frame rate depending upon the mood of the scene. The best estimate is that frame rates were somewhere between 16 to 24 frames per second. To complicate things even further, each theater would have their own frame rate for projection. This was typically at a slightly higher frame rate than the one used during filming. I know, things were a bit of a mess. But in the 1920s, a technological race began that would change all of this. The race was on to synchronize sound with moving pictures. Warner Brothers partnered with Western Electric, a company known for manufacturing telephones for Alexander Graham Bell. But they were also industry leaders in sound technology. Working with Warner Brothers, they started to figure out how to synchronize sound in movies. The engineers at Western Electric realized that in order to do this, the frame rate would need to be standardized. According to one of the engineers, they decided to take the average frame rate of the theaters on Broadway, which was 22 to 26 frames per second, making the average 24. In 1926, Warner Brothers released their film Don Juan. It utilized Western Electric's new Vitaphone system to add a soundtrack and sound effects. This would be the first movie to ever use synchronized sound. The following year, in 1927, Warner Brothers used the same system to release The Jazz Singer, the first motion picture with synchronized dialogue. After that, talking pictures took off along with 24 frames per second. But why do we still use 24 frames per second today? With our modern technology, we're capable of higher frame rates that would give us a theoretically better image. The simple answer is that we're used to 24 frames per second. It's what we associate with high-quality filmmaking. Film critic Peter Travers said it best in his review for the Hobbit movies, which were shot at 48 frames per second. Couple that with 3D, and the movie looks so hyper-real that you see everything that's fake about it, from painted sets to prosthetic noses. Higher frame rates look too real, and that's not what audiences want. We want to suspend our sense of disbelief and enter into a dream world. And that's why after all these years, even with our incredible advances in technology, movies are still 24 frames per second.